you have no confidence in self, you are twice defeated in the race of life. A people without knowledge of their past, history, origin, and culture is like a tree without roots. Liberate the minds of men, and ultimately you will liberate the bodies of men. Men who are earnest, but not afraid of their consequences. They try to put my soul in a black hole, but didn't realize this melanin is gold. That's why I shine with this little light of mine.
All right. Let's go. Let's get it. And you're now tuned into another Civics for the Culture with your host right here, Bennie, aka Poetically Williams III. And we had a few episodes off because I was doing a lot of research. And as we prepare, as we gather more information, as we do our due diligence of learning our history, learning our culture, learning what is really going on here? Because see, I'm not a politician. I'm not a lawyer. I'm someone just like you that has access to information, that can learn information, educate themselves, and really understand what this system is around us, how the system was constructed, but also what were the people like once before us in this system, and how they formed it, how they revolutionized, how they built the walls, how they built these buildings that we're in now, and how this structure came together, because a lot of this structure is here to hinder us, people of color. Yes, you have people that are white, you have people that are Hispanic, you have people that are all cultures and races that are affected by this legal system. However, in this legal system, where once it was legal to have slaves of people of color, where it was once a Jim Crow era of how you spoke to someone, you had colored and white signs. There was once a time where you could literally you could really harm it on legally and defame it, just the nature of ruining someone, not just spiritually, not just morally, not just physically, just all around. To people of color, there was a thing here. You know what I'm saying? This is real life. This isn't a movie. So before we get riled up, this is what we do here on Civics for the Culture. We go back and just understand the legalities that are going on here, but also understand the history, the cases, the many wars, the many revolutionaries that have come before us and that are happening around us and that have happened, so we can then understand how to move forward through time. And what we've done on the last episode, we talked about the pre-revolution to the Haitian Revolution, and how impactful that was to understand the people that lived there, and to how impactful it was to understand the mindset that was constructed there, the lifestyle that was happening there. And as the slaves start to build up the rebellion, the different classism and the different other things that were happening around on the island of Saint Domingue, which now is known as Haiti. So as we build up to this revolution, what I want to continue to do is I want to give you an episode. We talked about the pre-revolution of understanding the people that were there. What I want to do is now dig a little deeper. And you may wonder, okay, how does this connect to civics? Well, this connects to, because this ultimately, which we'll learn down the road, expanded slavery here in the United States, but also a lot of the characteristics from the people to a lot of the different ways that manner of characteristics of the people have carried on to here in the United States, along with the legislation as well, in many forms and facets that we'll learn throughout time, and we'll learn with this revolution how this impacted the world globally. That's why it's important to talk about. So first thing I want to talk about, as we go deep, is talk about the colonization and slavery that began there on this island. And when we go back to, what I'm going to do is I'm going to read an article from Britannica. And then also there was an article written in the Washington Post by, I want to definitely give the author, by Gillian Brockwell, Gillian Brockwell. And this was written in the Washington Post. And then there's an article written in Britannica that I'm going to read about the colonization, rule, and slavery of the Taino and Saboni people there. Taino, however you want to pronounce it. I want to say it's Taino, 'cause I had someone correct me last time on the last show, but I believe I try to do my best due diligence as we reread through time. There's the languages and the names are going to be so different from what we see now. So I try to make sure I do a pronunciation check before the show. So if I am mispronouncing a word or a name, try to know that I'm doing my best that I can. All right, so let's get into it. The Spanish began to enslave the native Taino and Saboni people soon after December 1492, when Italian colonizer Christopher Columbus sighted the island that he called La Isla Hispaniola, the Spanish island, later angelicized as Hispaniola. So when he saw the island, La Isla Española, the Spanish island, later angelicized as Hispaniola. The island's indigenous population forced to mine for gold was devastated by European diseases and brutal working conditions, aka slavery. And by the end of the 16th century, the people had virtually vanished. Thousands of slaves imported from other Caribbean islands met the same fate. After the main gold mines were exhausted, the Spanish were succeeded by the French, who established their own permanent settlements, including the Port de Pau in 1665 in the northwest and the French West Indies Corporation took over the area. Landowners of the Western Hispaniola imported increasing numbers of African slaves. Now, that's a brief overview. That was a quick overview of kind of how things got really turned up there. Christopher Columbus, the infamous colonizer. No, he's not they have, people will say, an Italian navigator, an Italian colonizer. People will say, what's another one? A settler. No, these are colonizers. Let's call things for what they are. You know, when we talk about police brutality, I'm not talking about police brutality for some cases. I'm talking about murder, police murders, right? So let's understand, let's frame things how they should be framed. All right. So now let's dig a little deep into Hispaniola. In Hispaniola, which is now known as Haiti and the Dominican Republic, Columbus encountered the Lucayans. The Lucayans, cousins of the Taino. The Lucayan were a branch of the much larger Taino, who were part of the Arawak language group. Historians disagree on how many Taino lived on Hispaniola at the time, with estimates ranging in the millions. One Bartolomeo de la Casa claimed that there were 3 million. 3 million. More about La Casa shortly. We'll go into La Casa. So Columbus built a fort where he left a few dozen of his crew and sailed back to Spain, right? So he left some crew there to kind of watch things, to kind of see how they could manage things there, and then headed back to Spain. As soon as they hit cooler weather, the Taino began to die. According to Howard Zinn, a people's history of the United States, Howard Zinn wrote about this as well. After significantly overselling the prospects for gold to the king and queen of Spain, Columbus returned to Hispaniola with 17 ships and 1,200 men. The men he had left at the fort the year before had all been killed. No wonder, like, you're gonna leave these men here, and the people there weren't having that. However, the men, after they had roamed the island in gangs looking for gold, taking women and children as slaves for sex and labor, Zinn wrote. Columbus and his crew searched for gold to no avail. So they filled their ships with something else they could sell. You got it, people. Of the 500 Taino they took, selected because they were the strongest, healthiest humans at that time. 200 died on the voyage to Spain. Many more died once they had been sold into slavery. So I mean, people, we're gonna use your body, not treat it well, not feed you well, not make sure that you're mentally okay, not make sure you're spiritually okay, and we expect you to live and be a great product. It doesn't max up. That's why you don't use humanist products. Human beings are human beings. Humanity. Let's keep going though. So Columbus tried again for gold, but this time he and his men didn't go looking for it. They ordered all the Taino people, 14 and older, to deliver a certain amount of gold dust every 3 months. If they didn't, their hands would be cut off. At this point, Taino were refusing to grow crops, and those who didn't bleed to death after their hands were removed began to die from famine and disease. Of course, they're now entering diseases that they never experienced on their islands. I mean, you got to think about it. These were indigenous people that had herbs and had plants to cure their bodies. I mean, they were experiencing a life, a healthy and holistic life, unlike these colonizers that came, that were unhealthy, that traveled on ships, that these ships were probably very sick. These ships where you had people in bunkers, not time the most cleanliest place. I mean, you could think about the bottom of a ship of wood, mold, all types of just rodents and things like that taking place, and now you're bringing it to these islands. Now you're raping these women that now have to carry that could be pregnant. Now you're passing on these diseases. And this is how this thing starts. They don't teach you, and they don't really give you the raw graphic understanding of how these people were killed. They say, oh, they died by disease. No, they died because people came that were unhealthy, and they did not seek to even understand the health practices that were being taken by these indigenous people, so they could not pass on their sickness, aka the pandemic we're going through now. Let's keep going. So when they fled, so you had a lot of the Taino people fled into the mountains, which they were hunted by dogs. Many killed themselves with cassava poison. We'll definitely have to I want to look that up, but you look that up in your own time. Cassava poison. Columbus men also continued to sexually abuse Taino women and girls. In 1500, Columbus wrote to an acquaintance that there are many dealers who go about looking for girls. Those from 9 to 10 are now in demand. And this is going to be something we talk about civics on the culture later on, is sex trafficking and the history of sex trafficking. I mean, you go right here. Sex trafficking isn't just a new thing. This is a new thing. This is something happening for centuries. Here you have Columbus wrote to an acquaintance that there are many dealers who go about looking for girls. Those from 9 to 10 are now in demand. As the population plummeted, they abducted indigenous people from other islands like Lucayan to work the fields and mines of Hispaniola. When the British colonized the Bahamas in the 1600s, the islands had been deserted for more than a century. Bartolomeu de las Casas arrived in Hispaniola in 1502 when he was 18. For decades, he participated in the mistreatment of the Taino and the introduction of enslaved Africans before renouncing it all, becoming a Dominican friar and confessing what he had witnessed, a short account of the destruction of the Indies. Interesting how a turn of heart can happen. It is worth quoting this link. So now what I'm getting ready to say, this is from and this now is a quote from Bartolomeu de las Casas, who, which you see right here, had I guess a change of heart somewhere deep and out, renouncing it all of the violence that had taken place, renouncing everything that kind of happened, what he saw, and kind of really taking back to really then understand that, hey, this is this isn't good. We should probably not be doing this. We probably should be going back and rejecting everything we just did. You know what I'm saying? And that's basically what just happened right here with Bartolomeu de las Casas. So in this very graphic, this is witty graphics, right? Let's get into it. They, Spanish explorers, forced their way into native settlements, slaughtering everyone they found there, including small children, old men, pregnant women, and even women who had just given birth. This gets graphic, so just FYI if you want to kind of fast forward. But I definitely think this is important to really know how graphic this is, because you get to understand the people and understand the time and really feel the emotion and really feel the heaviness and weight of what was happening, and not just understand we just didn't fall into the system. This system was slaughtered its way in. So they hacked them to pieces, slicing open their bellies with swords as they were so many sheep herded, as though they were so many sheep herded into a pen. They even laid wagers on whether they could slice a man into two at a stroke, or cut an individual's head from his body, or disembowel him with a single blow of their axes. They grabbed suckling infants by the feet and ripped them from their mother's breast and dashed them headlong against the rocks. Others, laughing and joking all the while, threw them over their shoulders, shouting, "Wriggle, you little perisher." When La Casas wrote this in 1542, there were only 200 Taino left on Hispaniola. Only 200 Taino left on Hispaniola, where you had millions, estimated millions. Across the Caribbean, he claimed the Spanish were responsible for the deaths of 12 to 15 million indigenous people. Now, it's just, I don't even know how to grasp my mind around how this could happen. And yeah, we get to a place of, we wonder about police brutality, and I say we have a heart problem here, but we've had a heart problem in this planet that we've needed to mend together for a while, for a long time. So historians usually attribute most of the deaths to the spread of diseases, which of course, yes, diseases were main spread, for which Native people had no immunity. But recently, historian Andres Resendez has pushed back against this, arguing that populations were lower than previous estimated, and a nexus of slavery, overwork, and famine killed more Indians in the Caribbean than smallpox, influenza, and malaria. Wow. Slavery, overwork, and famine killed more Indians in the Caribbean than smallpox, influenza, and malaria. Let's just set that in. Do you Google to see what the effects of smallpox was? Do you Google to see what influenza and malaria, what those impacts have been? We're talking, this was heavy. Soon after Columbia's death in 1506, this is in Hispaniola. This is pre-time. This goes back a couple of hundred years on decades before the Haitian Revolution, to give you an understanding of how French even took over and became to turn this place into a land of slavery. Soon after Columbus' death in 1506, Spanish explorers moved on to other islands like Puerto Rico and Jamaica, and according to La Casas, perpetrated the same outrages and committed the same crimes as before. Of course, the colonizers would. Of course, they have nothing but destruction, hate, and slavery and greed on their mind. By 1650, Zen wrote, reports indicate the Taino were extinct. But recent scholarship proves they may not have been the case. Researchers compared the DNA from the tooth of a pre-Columbian Lucanan woman found in a cave in the Bahamas to that of contemporary Puerto Ricans, who are generally thought to be an interracial mix of African, European, and Native American ancestry. They found the Native American component in the Puerto Rican samples was closely related to Lucanan DNA. The results were published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences in 2018. Jorge Estevez, a Taino descendant who assisted the research, told Newsweek, "I wish my grandmother were alive today so that I could confirm to her what she already knew. It shows the true story is one of assimilation, certainly, but not total extinction." The Taino also lived on in our language. The Taino also lived on in our language. So this is pretty interesting. Barbecue, hammock, canoe, tobacco, and hurricane all are derived from the Taino words. So you ask again, why do we go back in time to talk about this happening? We go back in time to talk about this happening because you got to understand the history of how colonization takes place and how it thrives and moves on to different areas, right? Moving on to different areas to build these structures that we just fall into living in, which we call, i.e., the matrix, right? Which we fall into a loop and order of someone else's creation. But what did that person create, and what were they creating from? What was their true intention? Was it birthed off heart and love? Was it birthed off greed? Was it birthed off money? Was it birthed off power? That's what we get into here, Civics of the Culture, and understand the Haitian Revolution, one of the most successful slave rebellions and revolts and revolutions of our time. It's important to understand as we're changing tides now. So I'm saying something, but I'm not saying something. But we need to understand our history and we need to learn from it so we can gather information, so we can be strategical, because in every bit of time, there's always been a revolution, because the system that's been set up has some flaws in it. Our flaws are built off slavery. Are we going to change that? Do we have the power to change it? Do we have the will to change it? I believe we do. And it starts by learning our culture, and it starts by learning our history. And that's what we do here on Civics of the Culture, hosted by me, Bennie, aka Poeticlee Williams. And what we did on this on Watch LOTUS X, you can find us on Watch LOTUS X. You can also follow me at Poeticlee, Poeticlee, is we just went back in time to understand how the French gained control of Hispaniola, aka Saint Domingue, which then became Haiti. We talked about before this, the people of that time, and now we're going to get into more of the revolution. I wanted to go all the way back in time so you can understand how the colonization started on this island, because you may be wondering, how did slavery even start, right? It started by colonizers that came over, brought their diseases over, brought their sick, infested, perverted minds over, and disrupted a cycle of holistic being there by indigenous people. What were they in search for? Gold, money? Gold at that time? It's sick. It's sick, but let's study together. Let's rise together. This is Civics of the Culture.